Speaks, which you can find on YouTube. And like I said, there's been other shows that I've done with Dylan. He's also had a bunch of other people on,
and
all different discussions. 9/11, of course. You know, the JFK assassination. Like I said, Lee Harvey Oswald. The New World Order in general. A few other topics too. I don't know all of what Dylan has done actually, but I do know that he's working on it. Like I said, you know, it's always good to encourage the younger ones among us a little bit, I think.
And
so,
my stream is up. I'm just putting the link around.
All right, that's great.
So
here's the thing. Like I said before, you wanted to discuss Dealey Plaza. So we'll go into that for a little bit. In the second hour, we might get into some other stuff. Very, very different from the JFK topic, but let's just see how this goes for now. Okay. Now, Dealey Plaza and the JFK assassination, I know. I'd go on and on about this a lot, but I really have tried to not do too many shows where, you know, I base the whole thing on it. Dealey Plaza is the little area that we're all used to seeing, and in fact, if anybody wants to, they can get some pretty good looks at it from how it appeared in 1963. More specifically in 1964, if you check out the Secret Service / local television station reenactment film, which I put up on my Daily Motion page. You can find that under Blind JFK Researcher on Daily Motion. And you can see an aerial view, you can see a map of Dealey Plaza, you can see the motorcade route, the way it was laid out, you know, and all this stuff is of interest. Also the footage that they took from a car, which they ran the motorcade route down so that you could see sort of the perspective that the passengers of the presidential limousine would have seen. And that's an interesting piece of film. Of course, it you know, altogether hangs the whole thing on Oswald and shows Secret Service agents reenacting Oswald's supposed escape and all that kind of good stuff. They utilize a car which is not the right car at all. It doesn't even fit the dimensions. However, Dealey Plaza today has been altered quite a bit. They tried to preserve it for some time, but previous to in the 1 or 2 years leading up to the 50th anniversary, they actually changed some of the landscape, supposedly restoring some of it. They've altered some things there, but if you wanted to get a good look at what it did look like in 1964, which was only it was less than a year after the assassination, obviously because the assassination occurred on November 22nd, 63, there wasn't much time in between 63 and 64 there, but yeah, so you can see that. They also utilized part of a piece of footage which was taken by the FBI, which was originally a silent piece of footage. I have that as well, but I never posted it on YouTube or anything, where they just show you the motorcade route. And I think that was recently used on the History Channel's Declassified Kennedy or whatever you know, Oswald did it mockumentary they were running at the time. But this stuff is all of interest because, like I said, it does show you what the landscape was like and everything else. So this is this little area. It's a park-like area, and it's named after the Dealey family, who are interesting historical figures in Dallas, and you can look them up if you want. You know, find out what they owned and what they founded and all that kind of good stuff, and just like most other towns. So Dealey Plaza is where the motorcade route, which led from Main Street to Houston, actually, yeah, straight down Main Street after leaving Love Field, because of course he was in Fort Worth earlier in the day. You know, he leaves Love Field in Dallas, ends up on Main Street after going through Turtle Creek and a couple other areas. You know, it's really a short drive to the Trade Mart where he was supposed to attend a luncheon. You know, and you can see footage of that stuff on CBS and all that because they had cameras sitting there at the time of the shooting. You go down Main Street, you make a right onto Houston, and then another quick left onto Elm Street. And Elm Street is where no one disputes this is where the shooting occurred. And that's why I've referred to it many times as the original Nightmare on Elm Street, because this is, I believe, where Wes Craven may have gotten the inspiration for his title there. But anyway, now, your questions, Dylan, regarding this, or should I just keep going on?
You can keep going on. Typically, you answer my questions with what you say in the end. But a specific thing I want to get into about Dealey Plaza, or if you want to save this for another show, the witnesses.
The witnesses. Well, which witnesses are we talking about? I mean, there are many in Dealey Plaza. A lot of people don't think that there are, but there's actually a couple hundred people who had a vantage point on this, one way or another. A lot of them were very confused. If you're talking about the people that were actually witnesses to the shooting, there is a good potential, say, 200 people at least that could have put their eyes on it.
Let's go with the main one, the one that the Warren Commission always uses, the nearsighted one.
Oh, Howard Brennan. Okay.
Do you want to go into him on another show, or?
No, we can cover him in brief. This right here points to, because we're about to get to the 50th anniversary, actually, of the Warren Commission release, which was in September of 1964, and the star witness for the Warren Commission was a man named Howard Brennan. Now, what is interesting about that is he's standing on the corner. If you can envision the Zapruder film for yourself for a moment, there's sort of a brickwork wall which is circular, which is on an opposite corner from where Zapruder's vantage point is, and you can see people milling around. It's on the corner there after the car makes its turn, and it's sort of in the background and disappears as the limousine makes its way toward the Stemmons Freeway sign, where you lose sight of Kennedy and Connolly for a few moments, and Kennedy emerges from the sign with his hands up toward his throat. He's not grasping his throat, but he does have his hands up there, and he's leaning forward, obviously in pain, already after emerging from behind that sign. But that wall that you see there is a gentleman who is near that wall who ends up being the star witness, and that's Howard Brennan. I can't recall exactly what he was wearing off the top of my head, but here's the fascinating part about Brennan. When the Dallas police broadcast a description of Oswald, about now this depends on whose timeline you believe, because it is very difficult to sync up the time from the Dictabelt recordings on the Dallas police broadcasts, because they are voice actuated. So if there's no traffic or just static, there's nothing being recorded, so they're not in real time. This has been one of the problems regarding handling the audio evidence in the Kennedy assassination, because on another show I'll get into the stuck microphone and the fact that in my opinion the shots were most likely recorded on audio, however badly, and BBN did the analysis on that for the House Select Committee in the 70s. But anyway, the broadcast goes out giving a description which includes Oswald's height, Oswald's weight, Oswald's hair color, what he was wearing, all this stuff. Now, the Dallas police claim and the Warren Commission claims that the source for that was Howard Brennan, who is standing on the ground, okay, in Dealey Plaza. Now, if you believe that Oswald was in the 6th floor of the school book depository building, Brennan is across the street, which is a 3-lane street. Okay, he's across the street and 6 floors down. Okay, now, not only this, but
So I'm gonna try to get that back. I don't know what happened. Chuck, I lost you. My call went on hold.
well, I don't know why. I'm still going here, it looks like.
Yeah, it just stopped. I don't know why it went on hold.
No
Um,
idea. No idea. But
so
I'm still.
I was at the part I got held when you said he was on the ground.
Okay. Well, we're still going. So looks like I'm still on UCY. Yep. Yeah. So he's on the ground, and Oswald is supposedly 6 floors up in the corner window. Um, like I said, he described his height, his weight, his skin tone, his hair. Okay, all this stuff from 6 floors down. Now, meanwhile, if you take a look at the films, if you take a look at the still photography, the window. By the way, no one captured, even though there are more than I believe I estimated 35 cameras in the plaza. No one captures an image of someone in that window with a rifle. Okay. Uh, Here's the deal, though. The window was not open all the way. So it's not like he has a clear shot. The windows were also kind of dirty. They were not very, very clean. This was a commercial warehouse building. And there were office buildings in there also, and there was a twin building across the way. But meanwhile, you're telling me that this guy is able to make this identification. And here's the real ringer to it. The man was a welder and was nearsighted. Now, if you take a look at the Zapruder film or any of the still photographs of Howard Brennan, you'll find that he was not wearing his glasses that day.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Vince just messaged me that that the thing just went dead.
All right.
I've still got the stream going, so
well,
if nothing else, I can send it to you. Vince, if you can hear us, just message me.
Well, I think
do you want to go ahead and you should probably just disconnect and reconnect.
I think I'm still active on UCY.
Mine is still going. Vince just said you all went dead on air just now.
Huh. See, this is where I got to try and open up the chat again, and I don't know what's going to happen if I do that, but let's try it.
Well, if they can't hear us, then just, like I said, I would just go ahead and restart the call, and I'll monitor the chat in just a few minutes.
Okay.
All right.
Just hang on.
Oh,
guys.
the call with UCY hung up.
Yeah, I just did that.
Oh. Man.
I am now going to try and bring us back on.
Yeah, Vince Easley is listening to it, and he just said we all went dead.
Yeah, is he listening to it on your stream or mine?
Your stream.
All right. Okay, I think we're back on.
Alright,
Alright, so I have no idea why that happened, but I was explaining about Howard Brennan and how he was able, supposedly according to the Dallas Police and to the Warren Commission, to make an identification from ground level looking up at the 6th floor window, which, like I said, according to photographic evidence, is not even fully open. So we have a half-closed window. We have a guy either standing or crouching in it, if you believe the official story, and he's able to identify his hair, his height, his weight, all of these interesting aspects from 6 floors down. And in addition to this, it turns out that Howard Brennan was nearsighted. He was a welder who was nearsighted, and if you take a look at the photographic evidence on Brennan, you'll find that he was not wearing his prescription glasses that day. So an amazing, amazing sort of, skill this gentleman has without his glasses and without his ability to see at a distance. He's able to identify Oswald in this way. So there's an interesting witness for you. But that's Howard Brennan. And, yeah, again, the star witness. And people in the JFK assassination community have often joked because we're very, very glad that you know, that his book was published posthumously because you know, after all, he would have had to answer for a lot of the lies that he set down on paper in that book. And I think it was called A Witness to History or something like that. I read it once and tossed it because it was absolute nonsense. But again, this is the star witness for the Warren Commission. Without Brennan's identification, and when you realize that the Dallas police had a very complete description of Oswald without anybody actually laying their eyes on him, you know, you begin to have the problems about how is it that they tracked him down so quickly, how is it that they knew he was in places he actually wasn't, and then you have the strange flight from Dealey Plaza with Oswald. So, but other witnesses, you want to talk about other witnesses?
Yeah, we can go into some of the other witnesses.
Sure. Who is of interest to you? I'll let you pick it.
I actually want to go into some of the witnesses who died. I don't have any specific names, but if you want to go into that, or do you want to save that for a show specifically about the witnesses?
Well, that's a whole weird sort of thing because it's become entangled over the years. There was a researcher who actually ran a small newspaper in Midlothian, Texas, named Penn Jones Jr. And for those who listen to UCY, he was also friendly with Mae Brussel. Wrote a 4-part series of books called Forgive My Grief, and actually did some interesting work on the assassination right there on the ground during the time of the Warren Commission, etc., etc. You can also see him in Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment movie. Penn Jones really was the guy who started the whole convenient deaths list. And, you know, some of this stuff is very strange. I mean, there is a guy named, let's see, Simmons, who was shot in the head pretty much after he had given some testimony that wasn't much appreciated. He was warned. There's been a lot of guys who were actually threatened and bullied and marginalized and everything else. A most interesting kind of thing here, though, as far as witnesses and how they were handled by the government, is a guy who only died very recently, and that was James Tague. James Tague was actually, if you look him up, you'll find that he was the 3rd wounded man that day. Because he was struck in the face by either, and nobody's ever been able to quite figure this one out, whether it was a bullet fragment or it was a piece of cement after a bullet strike very near where he was standing. Now, where Tague was standing was right by that triple underpass. As a matter of fact, he was under it at that time, and he ended up with a bit of a blood streak on his face. Let's see. He ended up with a bit of a blood streak on his face, which is most famously photographed. But he also ended up being the guy who wound up making them have to settle on that single bullet theory. Because obviously, if a bullet had struck near the curb that far away, it completely missed the vehicle. And therefore, if Oswald only fired 3 shots as they contended, then that means that you only have 2 bullets now remaining to have made 7 wounds between Connolly and Kennedy. So that actually was something the government was not willing to admit to until Tague did a interview with a local newspaper, and they actually challenged him on it. They tried to sort of bully him out of his explanation about having been struck by something. And even when he went to go testify before the Warren Commission, before the official questioning began, they let him know that that he had been down there, that they knew he had been down there, had filmed the curbstone and all these other things. This led to a very public move where the FBI went down and actually literally removed part of the curbstone. And if you check with, let's think about this for a second, Harold Weisberg. Harold Weisberg's work on this was pretty good. He tried to, with a Freedom of Information Act, request the the testing results from that curbstone and everything else, which had been magically patched, by the way, before they retrieved it and brought it back to Washington for evidence. Then he requested the plate which they used to do the testing to determine that there was no copper in the curbstone and all this other stuff, because Oswald supposedly had used a copper-jacketed bullet. The FBI then came back to, responded in court, let me just say, to his Freedom of Information Act request by saying that they had discarded it for space concerns. They, in one of the largest archives of evidence in the world at that time, they didn't have the space for this little plate. So that's awfully fascinating right there. But Tague is an interesting guy, and kind of got a little bit off the track there toward the end of his life. Wound up, I used to speak to him off and on, and I wound up in some pretty bitter discussions with him where he was pretty much screaming at me that Lyndon Johnson had been responsible for the assassination.
Wow.
Based on certain things, and when I challenged his assertions, he got pretty nasty with me. Previous to that, though, he was friendly to me, and he was actually a guy I wanted to bring on UCY. And then when I was actually discussing it with a friend off the air, that very week, he just very suddenly passed away. So I'm actually very sad I didn't bring him to the air. But there were a lot of witnesses in Dealey Plaza. The whole dead witnesses thing, though, leads way out of Dealey Plaza. I mean, there's a lot of dancers and vaguely connected gamblers and people connected to Jack Ruby, a lot of them, who died some very strange sort of deaths. There's also the examples of, like, Rose Cheramy, who, and again, this is still way outside of Dealey Plaza, but previous to the assassination, there was a lady named Rose Cheramy who claimed to have known Jack Ruby, claimed to have been involved in drug running, for Ruby and for other people in Dallas. She was also supposedly a prostitute and a few other things. Definitely somebody that was not of a great reputation, let's just say. But she ends up in the hospital just before the assassination, and she was flipping out and obviously high as a kite, and reporting to the medical staff at this hospital that Kennedy was going to be killed, and this was a couple days before the assassination. But she also claimed that she was in a car with a couple of Cuban guys who were directly involved in it. When Ruby killed Oswald on TV, a state trooper where she was actually in custody of her. She started claiming that Ruby knew Oswald, which is something that we've had a hell of a time proving ever since. But interesting that when Jim Garrison went to go look her up a couple of years later to go try and bring her in as a witness to prove that there was, a lot more going on there, guess what? She was killed by a hit-and-run driver on a relatively remote road, and nobody was ever found. She was just found dead there. There were a lot of one-car accidents, though, and hit-and-run drivers when it came to peripheral people. Now, the counter-argument about this, of course, is that when you have people involved in dangerous lifestyles, I mean, drug running, prostitution, et cetera, they do typically end up with shorter lifespans. So some of them can be discounted that way.
Yeah, but even still, those are interesting.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, there's plenty of stuff. I mean, all you got to do is, there are lists that include a whole lot of people. I think Richard Belzer actually did a whole book on it.
Yeah, somebody did a book on it.
Jim Mars mentions it in Crossfire. Like I said, Penn Jones Jr. is the originator of that kind of thing. And he actually not only did those 4 books, but let me get this straight too. He used to do a journal on the assassination, kind of like a continuous look into research and published articles on new findings by independent researchers. And it was a short paper-produced thing called the Continuing Inquiry, which had a lot of interesting stuff in it. I mean, stuff that even would be rare today of interest. Like, for instance, the Oswald photographs that were published of him in Mexico City. We're all, we can easily find the fake Oswald in Mexico City photographs that the CIA produced. However, the House Select Committee actually got a hold of about 10 more pictures of the same guy, which are supposedly this person claiming to be Oswald in Mexico City just before the assassination. And he actually published all of those, and this was at the time of the House Select Committee in the 70s. So, and I can't even find that complete set on the internet now. Maybe it's out there, maybe I just haven't seen it, but there was definitely some very cool stuff in there. And Penn Jones Jr., although I don't agree with everything he had put together, again, for the 60s and the 70s, he was doing a hell of a job just running an independent newspaper there, the Midlothian Mirror in Texas. That was his newspaper. So.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on just the witnesses.
Oh, yeah. But if you want to get back to Dealey Plaza, though.
Yeah.
If I can interject real quick, and I guess it is in relation to the plaza, and it's a little bit of a rewind, but you did say previously, I believe, that the shot has been recreated. Am I right?
Well, here's the thing. Nobody's ever done it from the plaza. Nobody's ever done it from the sixth floor window. That hasn't been done. What was done was in 1968. Let me see if I got that right in my head. 1968, right. There was a 4-part miniseries done by CBS Television. By that time, Dan Rather's career had taken off because Dan Rather, remember, was the big, was only, his career was made on the Kennedy assassination, essentially, because he was their man in Dallas at the time. So Walter Cronkite was cutting to Dan Rather, who was just a Dallas TV reporter. But anyway, Rather and Cronkite both sitting there, having gone through the Warren Commission's conclusions, and why is it that people don't believe the Warren Commission? Well, it's because of all these crazy conspiracy theories and books. And they went point by point trying to prove that that all, everything that anybody questions about this stuff is nonsense. So one of the things they did, though, was they brought, I can't remember the exact number, but I do believe it was 7 or 8 of the best marksmen that CBS News could find. They put a target on a track so that it was a moving target to simulate the pitch and everything else of where the motorcade was traveling and all that stuff, to give them a moving target, gave them a Mannlicher Carcano, the same type of ammunition that Oswald used, and out of these, marksmen, some of them were military, some of them were police. A former state trooper from Maryland named Howard Donahue. I got to think about this a minute. Howard Donahue actually did just as well as Oswald did under just about the same conditions. However, the Mannlicher Carcano that they had, they didn't count it when there were jams. They didn't count it when the weapon did not fire. They gave them more than one attempt, which was, not something that Oswald would have had as practice shots. You're talking about something moving on a target moving on a fixed track, which is not the same as a body, which is also moving around, and you can see in any of the films you want that Kennedy was not completely stationary. And so there's a lot of considerations there. Plus, he's not shooting through a half-closed, dirty window. But
so how valid do you think?
Howard Donahue was the closest one that I know of.
So he was a trained marksman, though. That is what he did exclusively.
Well, right. But Oswald was a former Marine who had been trained to shoot in the Marines. He wasn't a great shot, though, and you can actually get a hold of his records. They're erratic. When he first joined, he was, somewhere in the middle of he qualified as a sharpshooter at one point, which is not the highest thing that one can get in the Marine Corps. But He barely qualified, even with the rifle at all, later on in his training, and didn't seem to be very proficient with the damn thing. Not to mention the fact that the Mannlicher Carcano was an awful weapon, and terribly constructed, not very accurate. I mean, the Italians themselves refer to it, because it's an Italian gun. The Italians themselves refer to it as a humanitarian weapon, because you couldn't hit anything with it.
To expect.
Although I've seen demonstrations with the Mannlicher Carcano, and it's a bolt-action rifle and all this other good stuff. It is possible, if you have a well-maintained and and if you got lucky enough to get a well-machined version of the rifle, you could probably pull off what they said he did, but not the weapon that he had.
To say that Oswald could have made a shot like that 3 times with all that we know about him is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, that's what I see. Here's something that does shock people when I say this, because most people that believe that there was a conspiracy will not say this, but from a pure physics sort of standpoint, the single bullet theory is plausible if you believe that Kennedy was wounded through the neck. You can line up the trajectory, and it does make it. I don't just take my own judgment on this. Donald Thomas, who wrote the book, trying to think of the name, Hear No Evil. Thank you. Hear No Evil. He's also referenced in JFK assassination literature as D.B. Thomas. He was a statistician, and he's Dr. Donald Thomas, done many presentations on the acoustics evidence and a lot of other things. The single bullet theory is a possibility, but only if you can allow that Kennedy was wounded through the neck, not through the back, which I do not believe. If you adjust the head wound to the cowlick area of the skull, which seems also again implausible, then you can line these things up, and you still have the problem of exactly making Connolly turn the way he needs to turn during a very short period of time to line up his wounds to Kennedy's wounds. But theoretically, it's possible. Highly, highly unlikely, because first of all, Oswald wasn't on that 6th floor. The weapon is awful. The scope is flawed at best. The weapon, if it was assembled in the school book depository, could not have possibly been sighted in. Anybody who understands about assembling a rifle of this type and attempting to shoot it, if you don't sight it in, you're not going to have an accurate weapon. And to score, almost a headshot and a complete miss on the car seems kind of crazy to me. But, what do I know, right?
Yeah, you've only been researching this for 25 years.
Something like that, unfortunately.
longer than the Warren Commission.
Well, they had a certain amount of time, and the length of time is kind of irrelevant because they had the full resources of the FBI. Let's not forget that they utilized, Hoover and his people to conduct most of their interviews. Not the testimony that we see in the volumes, but when you go through the exhibits, you'll find that most of the preliminary interviews and the non-testimonial interviews were conducted by FBI agents of all sorts. Plus, there's that, the Gimberling report previous to that, which is hard to find, but I'm sure you could find it somewhere online. It basically gives the Warren Commission's conclusions within, 60 days or so of the assassination, as opposed to that 888-page lie that we got, in September of '64, and then the 26 volumes that followed a couple of weeks later, which are kind of funny because if you read them extensively, you find that they contradict most of the conclusions in the one volume anyway. But back to Dealey Plaza. So as I said previous, I was describing the way the car turns, and so when it actually goes onto Elm Street there, and we have the beginning of, well, let's just use the Zapruder film, even though I've got to say once again, I have serious questions about how authentic the Zapruder film is. Let's just use it as a point of reference. You see the car coming down Elm, and nothing is wrong with the occupants of the vehicle at first, until, depending on who you listen to, until it approaches that sign. In my opinion, I believe the first shot was fired. The second shot was likely fired while the car was obscured by the Stemmons Freeway sign. And at least the third shot, minimally, the headshot is at frame 313 on the Zapruder film, and you can see that plainly in that spray for one frame that comes out of Kennedy's head. Now, because of other things that are in the plaza that day, even though it's not part of the accepted canon of evidence by the Warren Commission and even by the House Select Committee, there is plenty of testimonial to say that there were other bullet strikes. Stavis Ellis was a police officer who witnessed bullet strikes on the pavement, previous to any of the occupants in the car having been hit. There was at least a husband and wife who witnessed, and there's a whole famous incident here, which you can see pictures of Buddy Walters, who was a deputy sheriff in Dallas, standing next to another gentleman who is in a suit, who is apparently picking up a bullet off of the ground. That is on the opposite side of the street from where Zapruder's vantage point is, over by the manhole. There's more than one witness that claims the dirt was disrupted by a bullet strike there, and possibly even the cement on the manhole cover had been struck. A guy named Mark Oakes actually tracked down a couple of the police officers in the early 90s and videotaped them discussing the fact that there had been a bullet strike over there. But if you add that bullet strike along with the take strike, along with the minimum of 2 hits that you see, in Kennedy's car, the shooting up of sparks, the strike on the asphalt, and all this other stuff, where actually asphalt was displaced, according to Mr. Ellis when I spoke to him. You'll find that there's a whole lot more than 3 shots. And the 3 shells that they find in the school book depository are suspect themselves. So, those who say there's no evidence of any other bullets other than what came from the Oswald gun, first of all, there's a big challenge as to whether that's Oswald's gun. And secondly, there's plenty of evidence for plenty of other rounds being fired elsewhere. So the take strike, the 2 in the car, the 1 on the manhole cover, and at the least 1 that struck the asphalt in something like 8 or 9 seconds, gives us now 5 shots in 9 seconds as opposed to the 3 shots in 6 point whatever seconds. Guess what? I don't think that that bolt action rifle, whether he used the iron sights, which is the Bugliosi conclusion, and which was the conclusion of G. Robert Blakey, who wound up heading the last part of the House Select Committee on Assassinations, that Oswald must have used the iron sights, not the scope, so therefore the scope is irrelevant, but it's still in the way on the damn gun. Let's not forget that. So here's the deal. The shooting then becomes impossible if you can accept that there was at least those 5 shots. Of course, according to the official explanation, there are three cartridges on the 6th floor of the school book depository. Therefore, there were 3 shots fired. However, the condition of one of those cartridges also leads one to believe that perhaps it was the type of thing that was being dry fired in the weapon, and that if it was brought to the school book depository that day, if it was in that rifle, was probably not a complete round when it was ejected from the rifle to begin with. But another story for another day. So, other questions about Dealey Plaza?
Not really any other questions about Dealey Plaza. Did we go into Oswald's how he was arrested immediately? Did we go into that on the show about Oswald?
I think I did, but I mean, it's worth covering real quick. The official story is that that Oswald, and of course the people that are Oswald did it related, they always tell you that he was the only guy who was missing from the roll call that they took at the school book depository of employees. That's a bunch of bull, first of all. The guy left, and even during questioning, according to more than one police account, although we don't have very many written records, no stenographer, no recording, outside of the postmaster there, who also doubled as an FBI agent, Mr. Holmes, his notes are the only ones that are, anywhere near complete on the interrogation, and that was from one section of the interrogation, but I digress. According to the official story, Oswald goes out the front door of the school book depository rather casually after having been confronted by Marion Baker, who, is the police officer who within 90 seconds of the shooting was on the second floor, pointing a gun at him and asking, Mr. Truly, who was the boss there at the school book depository, does this man work here? And Mr. Truly says yes, so Marion Baker moves on. Interesting little side note to that is that if you ever got a chance to talk to Marion Baker, which I did, you would get some funny stuff out of him, like, look, if I knew that SOB was going to cause us this much problem, I would have shot him right then and there. But, because Oswald did cause him quite a headache by getting killed like that in front of 70 police officers in the basement and everything, right? Anyhow.
Was Marion Baker there during that?
No, he's the motorcycle officer who jumped off his motorcycle, and you can see him actually running into the school book depository on a piece of film. Ooh, see, here's where I'm going to forget.
Oh, no, I mean during Oswald's death.
No, I don't believe he was in the basement at that time.
Okay. I didn't know if Baker might have ended up being there.
No, a lot of people don't realize there was approximately 1,000 people employed by the Dallas PD at the time. So there's a lot of people that you could that were there, and a lot of interesting people that were there. A guy named Larry Sneed actually put together a pretty good book, having spoken to more Dallas police officers than any other researcher I've ever known for certain. I think he's over 200 or 300 of them that he spoke to. And the name of the book is No More Silence. If you can find it, it's pretty good. A lot of their accounts contradict each other, as you would expect, but he was just taking down verbal histories from these guys. So anyway, Oswald goes out the front door of the school book depository, walks a couple of blocks, and grabs himself a bus. Okay, now the bus then gets stuck in traffic, so he gets off the bus, oddly asking for a transfer, which they found in his pocket. Okay, supposedly when he was arrested. He then walks a couple of blocks and goes to catch a cab. Of course, he actually offers it to an older lady who was there first at one of these cab stands, then takes a cab to his rooming house, but not directly to his rooming house, a couple of blocks past his rooming house, pays the guy, walks back to his rooming house. At this point, he supposedly gets his 38, and which is a whole other weird issue, and a jacket, and walks out of his rooming house pretty much, a few minutes later, and makes his way down to the Texas Theater. On his way to the Texas Theater, though, this is when the official story claims that Officer J.D. Tippett decided to stop him based on the description, which had been flashed out, like I told you about with Howard Brennan earlier. That description went out pretty quickly, like within 10 minutes. So within 45 minutes or so. I believe the timeline I might be a little bit off on, because the official story and what I know are two different things. So I'm going with the official story to tell you how ludicrous it is. Within 45 minutes, he decides to gun down J.D. Tippit, who gets out of his car after pulling up alongside of him where he's walking on the street, and the officer doesn't even make it around the front of his car to the sidewalk when Oswald guns him down. Oswald then makes his way down to the Texas Theater, goes in without paying for his ticket, even though he has money in his pocket. And a shoe salesman that happened to notice him walking down the street and saw him go into the theater without paying for his ticket calls the police, or actually makes the ticket taker call the police. Because this guy had, didn't buy a ticket, and of course, I don't know, at least half a dozen police cars, FBI agents, the press, and a huge crowd gather outside of the Texas Theater. And within an hour and 20 or so of the shooting, Oswald is unceremoniously yanked out of the front, screaming that he's not resisting arrest, and pretty much with the police having to protect him from the crowd, which is now gathered around, I think because a police officer had been killed, and maybe they were pretty angry about that. That's why they jumped on him like that. But I do find it amazing that that there were FBI agents, press, and there's actually photographs. There's actually photographs and film of Oswald being yanked out of the front of that theater. If you find the pictures, you'll notice on the marquee one of the movies playing is War is Hell. But anyway. This is Oswald's quick arrest, and pretty damn good detective work as far as I'm concerned from the Dallas PD, because after all, they have a double homicide guy in custody, in less than an hour from one and in less than 2 hours from the other.
And one of them is the president.
And pretty good work considering they let him slip out of the school book depository out of the front door the first time. So hey. Yeah, there's a whole lot of holes in that.
Do you think? I think I asked you this on the last show, but do you think Lee Harvey Oswald killed J.D. Tippit?
It's hard to say. I don't think so. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on there. Again, from the Dallas police, radio recordings, they identify that they found automatic shells. Okay, revolver shells, and they're clearly different on the .38.
How do you think he died then?
Oh, it's quite provable that somebody shot J.D. Tippit. That's for sure.
Right, but do we have any idea who?
See, I don't know. I've heard a lot of things postulated about this, and to be honest with you, with the poor way that the evidence has been handled regarding the entire case, it's hard to say. It is possible, however, in my mind, that Oswald could have killed him because Oswald might have known that he was in trouble. There's a whole weird sort of thing about J.D. Tippit, and I hesitate to point to a lot of it because I haven't done the work myself. So there's a lot of possibilities regarding the Tippit murder, a lot. So it's one of those things I don't like to give a definitive answer on. My opinion is that he didn't kill anybody, but at least not that day. And they also tried to hang the attempted assassination of General Walker on him, which according to Walker's own words, the bullet that he dug out of the wall there in his den was not a Mannlicher Carcano bullet, not at all.
They really wanted to get Oswald.
Oh yeah, and they only hung the Walker thing on him, after post-assassination, mind you. And it was kind of utilized to show that he was, somebody was looking to make a name for himself as an assassin, and all that kind of good stuff.
He wouldn't need to kill a general if he wanted to make a name for himself. He shot the president.
Well, yeah, but General Walker at that time was an outspoken kind of right-wing guy who, who let me see how I can put this. Edwin Walker, and to put him in his proper historical context, you can find stuff about him online, and you can get an idea of what type of figure he was. He was definitely like a John Birch Society guy, who Oswald having been at the very least appearing to be left-leaning, or a communist sympathizer, or a Fidel Castro sympathizer, as he was portrayed in the public, and as he did himself, actually, by appearing on WDSU radio and I believe television in New Orleans during that summer, after being arrested in a scuffle with anti-Castro Cubans on the streets in New Orleans, right outside of the International Trade Mart, which was headed by Clay Shaw. But anyway, he was handing out pro-Castro literature in a city like New Orleans, which was pretty interesting. And he got into a scuffle with some anti-Castro Cubans. Everybody went to court, and he was the only one who was fined $10 for disturbing the peace or whatever it was he was charged with. And that led to an article in the paper and the appearances on Ed Butler's, he had a show about South and Central American affairs, Latin Listening Post it was called, that's it. So he appeared on there by himself, and then he appeared with the guy he was in the scuffle with on the street on a radio on a radio show called Conversation Carte Blanche, with Ed Butler again, and the host, William Stuckey also is involved in these broadcasts. But the funny thing is, of course, that both of them were involved in stuff that was being funded by the CIA and all that other stuff we find out later on, which is pretty funny. But yeah, he goes on the show, on that show Conversation Carte Blanche with Carlos Berenguer, who was the the guy at the front line of the people that were involved in the scuffle with him in the streets there. So, professing that he is not a communist, but is a Marxist-Leninist, believes that Fidel Castro should be able to determine how the future of his nation should go, and et cetera, et cetera. Kind of poorly. The only intelligent thing that was said during all that was that, and of course, he when he's explaining his time in Russia, he makes a little slip of the tongue during one of those programs, and says that he was under the protection of the U.S. State Department, and then quickly corrects himself and says, "Well, that is to say, I was not under the protection of the State Department." When the Warren Commission published the transcript of that broadcast, not realizing that all of us would be able to get a copy of that years later, they totally omitted the fact that he at first said that he was, under the protection of the, the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. State Department, et cetera, et cetera. Which, of course, they have wound up loaning him the money to come back from the USSR, which was another weird thing. But anyway, yeah. So my opinion on Oswald, though, with the J.D. Tippit thing, is that some more work needs to be done there. There's some suspicious behavior by Tippit previous to his death, and all that stuff. And it could be that Tippit was just an innocent cop in the wrong place at the wrong time. But other people have postulated that maybe Tippit was supposed to arrest Oswald, or maybe Tippit was supposed to kill Oswald, et cetera, et cetera. I have to say that I don't have a great opinion on that. I just vaguely sort of believe that he didn't do it. But I haven't done enough work on it personally to make a really good, solid statement.
Well, no, it's not as important as the Kennedy assassination, though.
Well, yeah, it isn't as important, let's just say, but it is pretty important. Because, see, and here's the weird thing to me, and I don't know why nobody ever brings this up, but, okay, first of all, there's a problem, but according to the official story, let's just not even get into my problems with it. He orders, this cheap 38 and this cheap World War II surplus, Italian rifle. from Klein Sporting Goods, and please, I don't even want to get into the whole delivery of it and everything else, because at one point we have Railway Express delivering to a post office box, which is like UPS trying to deliver to a post office box, which is impossible. But anyway, leaving that aside, not to mention the violation of all sorts of postal regulations with the delivery of firearms, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Here's the thing, though. Let's just assume that both of these weapons were his. There are two major issues I have with this. First of all, if he had planned to do what they say he planned to do with the rifle that day, why wouldn't you bring the .38 with you? You'd have to imagine that you might be quickly swarmed or somebody might try to stop you. And if you were planning on making an escape, you might want to try to have a weapon on you that you could shoot your way out of in a tight space. And the Mannlicher Carcano was not the weapon for that. The .38 would have been the weapon for that. So he doesn't have his sidearm with him. The other problem is the FBI, try as they might, and the Warren Commission and other government assets, the district attorney at Dallas, everybody tried to prove that Oswald had purchased or owned more ammunition. Guess what? There is no other ammunition. There's no extra. Now, there is only what was left in the clip, in the Mannlicher Carcano, and a few rounds that were loose, supposedly in Oswald's pocket. And meanwhile, there's conflicting reports about who actually took possession of the rounds. They're from two different companies. There's different casings that don't quite match up to the slugs, which are in Tippett's body, from two different manufacturers of ammunition. Now, each of these weapons, if you read the Klein Sporting Goods ad, did come with some ammunition. But you mean to tell me this guy is going to get himself ready for an assassination and everything else and not have any backup ammo?
In case he misses or in case he gets caught?
Right, I don't know. It's one of those things
could be poor planning, but if you're gonna go kill anyone, really, I would hope that you're smart enough to at least think of that, honestly. It's a little sad if you can't.
Yeah, and I lost UCY for a minute. My point here was that he didn't take the .38 with him. He didn't have the weapon to shoot his way out if he was caught or discovered. It just seems like poor planning, but also the FBI, the Warren Commission, local police, the district attorney, nobody could prove that he owned even another box of ammo or even any more rounds, even among all of his personal effects that they took out of Ruth Payne's garage, that they took out of the rooming house, that they found elsewhere. Nobody finds extra rounds except for a couple of .38 rounds, which were in his pocket. So he had no extra rounds for the rifle, and hardly anything besides maybe one reload for the .38. So, somebody explain that to me again. Like I said, I repeated that because I think that Skype accidentally dropped UCY and brought it back.
Your call's getting staticky.
Oh, great. Well, I'm trying here, folks. I don't know what to say. It's like everything's interference. What can I do?
The NSA.
What can I do? Yeah.
On that note, I am also having a little bit of difficulty. I'm going to go ahead and reset my modem. After that, I don't know if you discussed our guest for the second hour, but I have him waiting in the wings. And if you haven't discussed it, so I can bring it up for our listeners, that we're going to have someone that has some experience actually working with the coyotes, or the coyotes, whatever you'd like to prefer to pronounce, in actually bringing in illegal immigrants into the country. So I think it's going to be very interesting to get that aspect of what happens on the inside, because we get such a biased view of it, and I've even seen it from the law enforcement side. So that, and we're going to tie it into some recent events going on, and I think it'll be an interesting second half to follow up, although it's not really connected to our first half or JFK, but hey, it's the Ocelli effect.
Exactly. And, we'll go
Oh,
back.
never mind. No reset needed. Okay, I think I'm finally working, guys.
Yeah, you're
Awesome.
both working now.
Awesome. It looks like everything's all right now. Okay.
Yeah, well, they probably got mad that we were talking about how they were running interference.
Oh, that's
Well,
nice. Yeah.
what can you do? I mean, what? Like, I'm talking about a 50-year-old crime, and they're going to attack me during that. All right, thanks. Hey, let's talk about immigration. Well, we'll get away with that. Like I said on a previous show,
It really did work out that way.
right. Let's see how long this lasts. Okay. Like I said on a previous show, I wanted to explore this more from the side of the players, because I'm kind of sick of watching what the mainstream is doing with it. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to somebody who was intricately involved with the human smuggling side of this, really. Which is what a coyote does. Like I said on a previous broadcast, depending on the cultural shift here, they have a couple of different names for it. But when you're talking about people that are coming from south of the border, from Central America, from South America, from Mexico, all of these areas, yeah, this is what they call them. They call them coyotes. And yeah, like you said before, a lot of people pronounce it coyote, but either way, we know what we're talking about. And it's a hell of a thing. A lot of people think it's very easy to waltz over that border. It is not. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of strange things that go on. And like I said, I have somebody that I do want to bring on at one point to just sort of describe their journey. But this is going to be a great piece to set that up. Is he ready anytime, Michelle? Or
let me go ahead and let him know that we're ready for him. He's going to be calling in on the phones. On that note, we definitely encourage callers. However, we ask that you're always respectful and nice, and if not, we'll hang up on you. But like I said, yeah, we would definitely like callers, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of what I've experienced as well, because I did work in law enforcement, and I've handled 911 calls when somebody's calling from the middle of nowhere. They're like, help me, in Spanish, and there's a lot to it that people don't see. So anyways, I think this caller has an interesting aspect, also, having immigrant parents as well. So I think we have a lot to talk about, and it'll be interesting to see it from the other side. Let me go ahead and get that gentleman to call in.
Sure. 718-717-8296. You can join in. I do want to kind of get a little bit of the story from this gentleman first. I don't know what we're calling him or anything, because I don't know if he really wants to identify himself.
Yeah, actually, he said he'd prefer if not, because, it is a little illegal, so... Right,
so what we're discussing here is, I'm just going to kind of let him tell his story there, and I don't know what we should call him, but yeah, this ought to be interesting, Dylan. I don't know if you want to hang around for this.
What I'm going to do, Chuck, if it's okay with you, I'm going to end this broadcast, then I'm going to start another one, because I kind of want to keep the JFK stuff separate. Really, again.
Hello?
Hello.
There we go.
The thing disconnected me again.
All right, well, you're here, but... All right. I'll tell you what, Dylan, let me click you off for now, and then you go ahead and set that up, and... all right?
All right.
All right.
Thanks. All right, you have been listening to The Truth Speaks. I'm signing out.